and gentlemen, we had a big drop off, but you don't want to miss this, guys. Welcome to episode 5 of Filmmakers Uncut, one of the most new podcasts for learning about people in the filmmaking industry, the tips and tricks of how they became successful in the career. And the reason why we created this podcast is because we thought that there was a lot of stories and experiences that a lot of new filmmakers are going to gain a lot of insight and value from, and that's kind of why we started this podcast. We're on episode 5 and we have John Archbell here. John, how are you?
Good, guys. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
We're good, thank you. Thanks for joining us. So why don't we just start ahead with a little bit of an intro, talk about who you are, a little bit about your experiences, what you do now, and we can go ahead and go from there.
Sounds good. I've been a property master in film and television in Toronto for the last 30 years now, I guess. And I started as a photographer at Sheridan College and worked a little studio when I first got out of college. And a buddy of mine called and asked if I'd like to work at the Journal, which was the predecessor to the CBC's National. And I went and worked there for about 3 years and then got an offer to work on a movie of the week for CBC. So I left that position and went over and became a freelancer, which you guys know is sort of, it's great when you're working, and when you're not, the pay's terrible. So I'm in one of those spots right now, which is fine. I actually quite like I don't want to work 12 months out of the year. It's too taxing. So I've been off since just before Christmas. I'll probably go back to work in April on a show for Amazon. I think it's going to be 4, and that'll take me through the summer, probably right into another show that I just finished. So that's sort of where I'm at. Yeah.
That's awesome. That sounds very exciting. We kind of skipped through your history there. I feel like there's a lot of important details that people are going to find super useful. Like you said, you started off as a photographer and then kind of worked your way up to the position you are at now. Something we love to do is kind of do a deep dive into some of the struggles you had, just starting up, what made you start photography, and then how did you build your first connection into the industry? Was there a story behind that? Can you give us a little bit more information?
Well, you guys might have similar scenarios. It's sort of the people that or make contact with, just as we're doing now. The people that might be watching, they might be doing little independent films working together. My cousin used to work at a big photo studio called Templeton Photo Studio, and before I graduated from Sheridan's applied photography course, I had taken an art fundamentals course thinking I would be a graphic artist. I liked to draw when I was younger. But I realized that I was really sort of fascinated with photography and how sort of instant results you got with it. And some of the, like shooting at night and that sort of stuff was really cool. Like I thought, boy, it's really neat to work in a darkroom and watch this stuff just sort of materialize out of nothing in the chemicals, That sort of drew me into photography. So the course that I took at Sheridan for art fundamentals was exposed me to photography because it was one of the aspects of the course, which was only a year. It was really just a primer to get you interested in graphic arts, photography, industrial design, all those sorts of things, life drawing. So I reapplied for the photography course, which is a 2-year course. It's all studio work, architectural photography, that sort of stuff. They had a model course at the time. They probably still do at Sheridan. So they hooked us up with models. We worked together. So they got headshots. We got experience. And then my cousin offered me a job, or through his art director at Templeton Studios, which was at the time was a massive photography studio in Scarborough. Big, huge warehouse. Everything at the time, so this is back in 1988 when I graduated, everything at the time was shot size as. So if you were looking at a Canadian Tire flyer or a catalog at the time and you saw a full page ad for tires, that shot was shot on 8.5 by 11 film. And one of my jobs when I worked there for the first 2 weeks was to load film in the dark, right? So, film holders were, yay big, and you went into the dark and you loaded sheet film, and then you brought out your loaded film to the photographers who shot with strobes and tungsten. They hired me because they were busy shooting a wallpaper book for Color Your World. So as you walked around the studio, there were sets. Different sets were set up for different wallpaper backgrounds, right? And so I was helping move furniture, loading film. My cousin's specialty was tires for Canadian Tire. So he put tires in his workspace, because all these different workspaces were just big cubes with light spilling into them. And as you walked down the studio, you could go to each photographer. I think they had 12 photographers at the time shooting full time with their own gear. And he would set up tires in his space and scrub them with like a wire brush, and then he had a spin that gave them sort of a sheen, because tires are pretty boring, but you want them to have a bit of a sheen in the photos. There was another pair of guys that their specialty was clothing, so they had all the models. They were over in another area of the space. Everybody had their own sort of thing, and I was at the time I was making $450 a week to work there.
Wow.
So
Wow.
5 9-hour days or something like that, which I thought was pretty good at the time, coming out of college.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, for sure.
a week and a half went by, and they thought, okay, let's offer this guy a full-time job. So because it was a 2-week contract, and when they offered me the job, it was $350 a week because it came with benefits. And I was sort of like, I don't know, that seemed like a cut and pay, and I turned it down, which may or may not have been a mistake. It was, if you've worked in a studio a lot, it'll test you, because it's dark. It's a beautiful sunny day today here where I live, but if you're in the dark all day and you finally walk out at the end of the day, it's sort of a drag.
Jarring.
I didn't really want to be stuck doing that kind of stuff. My cousin, who got me in, he, when they switched to digital, and it wouldn't have been that much after I left, because I know digital existed when I was in college. The first cameras were just coming out, and they wanted everybody in that studio to switch to digital, and the cost was prohibitive for him. He said it was like, I think it was $40,000 or $50,000 for him to buy a large format camera with a phase 1 back and all that sort of stuff that he needed to get to join that world. So he left, and that was, I don't know, probably 5 to 7 years later, he left that business and he went into carpentry. And as a funny aside, he went into the film business for a little while to work as a carpenter. But as soon as that opportunity ended, a buddy of mine said they were looking for some junior position, someone to fill a junior position at the Journal, which was Barbara Frum and Peter Mansbridge at the time were the hosts, and they also piggybacked on a show called Midday, which was all out of an office downtown Toronto, which they no longer have. CBC had buildings all over the city, and each one had its own function. The building was on Jarvis, and our building was on Carlton. And then years later, they consolidated all that down to Front Street. But I never was a full-time employee. It was a year-to-year contract. I think I was making $30,000 a year at the time, and 2 weeks holidays. Had a pager on my belt the whole time, because if news broke, they wanted me to come into the office and get gear packed to send guys off to Afghanistan or wherever the news was happening. And so I was there when the Berlin Wall came down. I got sent to Ottawa to work with a crew interviewing Brian Mulrooney at his residence in Ottawa. It wasn't all that exciting for me, but I moved up, and then I started in the crewing department, where producers would come to me and ask myself and the fellow I worked for if we could get who was available. They had 10 crews at the time, sound and video. So 7 of those crews were stationed in Toronto, 2 were in I think it was 2 in Vancouver and 1 out of Montreal. And so the guys would all vie for jobs, like the sweetest jobs, because when they went away, they got per diem, they got good money. And then if you had to call them and say, hey, we want you to do streeters at the corner of Yonge and Carlton, talking about, the latest breaking news. Streeters were, somebody going out with a microphone and a camera and a light and an umbrella stand or something, and just interviewing people on the street. They didn't want to do that, right? They wanted to go like some beautiful, location like Africa or something to shoot a documentary, which at the time, documentaries were a thing, and they spent a lot of money on that sort of stuff. Now everything seems to be, it's all watered down, and, all the news, if you go to Google, if you go to wherever you get your news from, it's all just aggregated into, there's not as much deep dive journalism going on. So anyway, I wasn't really a big news hound back then. I stayed there for about 3 years. I got a call from my brother-in-law who was working on, so again, people that that's why it's always important to network and never piss anybody that off. Calls you or recommends you to a show. So my brother-in-law called, and he was working on Street Legal at the time, and which was a big CBC show that I think they tried to reboot a couple of years ago, probably to no success, but I think it ran a season. But it was a big deal at the time. This was back in 1991, maybe. And so I didn't get the job there, but they recommended me to another fellow who needed somebody to do half a week in sets, helping moving furniture and stuff, and the other half in props. And so I went and did that for 4 months. When I quit my job at the Journal, my boss thought I was nuts because I was leaving like a full-time gig. And I only had 4 months lined up on the next show. So he thought that was sort of foolish of me. But, when you're young, you're like, yeah, you're going to try this. I had a young family at the time, so it was a bit of a jump. But I made more in that 4 months than I would have in a full year at the Journal, because the hours are longer. There's unions that, dictate your pay. Overtime, you start getting into time and a half. Double time if you work stupid hours. They don't do that anymore because productions are pretty concerned about overtime. So, now a typical day is about 12 hours, 11 plus lunch.
Long days.
You don't get paid. Yeah, and you don't get paid for lunch. But, some days, like I did a show, one of the first shows I keyed, I was the property master of, we worked 23 and a half hours on the last night of shooting because they had to get all the shots, because all the camera gear had to go back in the morning and all the crews were moving on to another show. And I was on a flat rate, and everybody that was on an hourly rate made like 3 times as much money as I did.
Yeah, they're probably excited. They were probably excited, like 23 hours, hell yeah.
Yeah. But I did, yes and no. I mean, it really was a deterrent to productions. Like once you went into triple time, I mean, people were making oodles of money, right? But it was a deterrent to production to say, hey, you shouldn't work us this many hours. So now everything's a little more, okay, this is our day. They plan their days very, very strictly, right? So they say, okay, we're going to only shoot 8 pages a day or something, right? Depends what kind of show.
No more triple
kids show. No. And they'll try and, even at 11, after 11 hours, somebody will come in and say, okay, guys, you got to go home. We'll pick this up tomorrow, kind of thing. Because it costs them too much money.
It's a lot more unionized now too, right? Than it was before. Like fair work, fair play.
Yeah, it depends. It's commercials are non-union, sort of, but they also have the camera department's usually unionized. They're an IA department or crew. Then there's 2 main unions in Toronto. There's NABET 700, which is under CEP, and then there's IA, which is the big union. They do all the big features and any of the action films that come to town and big television series and stuff. So yeah.
Right on. A question I have on my end is, I've watched Schitt's Creek. It's a great show. How did you end up getting into that as a property manager?
Well, the producer that called me to do it, I'd worked with for many years prior to, and he's the first call they made. So, Dan Levy and it was his show. He obviously got his father Eugene to come and work on it, and Catherine O'Hara, but it was Dan's baby, right? And so Dan finds a production company that can shoot it, right? And just like if somebody calls you and says, "Hey, I need you guys to shoot a used car salesman's ad or something," right? You're going to amass people. Well, they start amassing people, and one of the first people they call is a line producer or a producer, because they're tuned into who's in town, who can crew the show. So it's sort of a luck of the draw thing on who gets the show. Because quite frankly, I could have been busy when he called, and I would have said, I don't know what you're working on, but I'm busy for the next 4 months or something, right? But as soon as you hear that it's going to have Eugene Levy in it or something, you're sure like, oh, okay, sure, that sounds great. Because I grew up watching them as a kid, right? I was just like in awe of SCTV. So so what I'm trying to say is it's a bit of luck, right? Especially at where I'm at now. Like I just got 2 calls yesterday for work, and I had to turn them down because things are ramped, and because it's so busy in town, all these production managers and line producers are trying to line up their crew, and they're having a hard time. So I'm in NABET. IA shows are trying to come over and borrow crew because they can't staff shows, right? Because they might have all these, like, the Umbrella Academy and all those big series that are going on over in IA. They're all fully crewed, and now somebody from LA says, "Okay, here, Canada, we're coming up to Toronto to make a $50 million series. Let's get started in April." So they hire somebody to start setting things up, find a studio, rent gear, all that stuff, because even gear's at a premium, right?
Right.
Then they start.
Everyone's trying to restart again, right?
Yeah.
Right. Everyone's trying to restart at the same time, and people are just not able to find the right people.
Yeah, and I think there was a void in product, right? Like you're watching TV now, and you're going back now. They're promoting like Friends again, or like there's shows.
There's a lack of good content, and they just want to keep on producing, and so people keep on tuning in and paying that monthly subscription. But it's a good thing for the production world. I mean, anyone who's doing entertainment in the film industry, I'm sure they're consistently busy because we're always going to want more movies and TV shows and the stuff like that.
It's a pretty safe business in a sense because it's it's recession proof almost, right?
Yeah,
people are
if you get lucky, like you mentioned,
right?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you was about you said you started off in school and you were able to land your first job, and then kind of like segue into press and journalism and then over towards TV. But I feel like a lot of people nowadays are a little wary of going through the school path because they're not 100% sure if it's going to be as successful, right? Like there's so many people who just go right into freelancing. So what I wanted to ask you is that if like you were to restart your career all over, like you haven't started your first job yet, doing photos with your friends and family, what would you do if you were to start like in 2021, right? 2021, you're like, it's a brand new year. I want to start my photography career. What would the steps that you think you would take now?
For photography, I mean, you just got to shoot. And the more you do, the better you get. And I've told people this before. I don't know if you need to take a course now. I don't want to be the guy that says, hey, don't go to school. But if you want to be a photographer, put the shingle out in front of your house that says, I'm a photographer. Or your online presence says, I'm a photographer, right? If you're, it's a pretty, I don't understand the new world of online presence, right? Like,
right.
I have an online presence for photography, but I've chosen to keep my portraiture and my commercial work separate from that. I'm as a hobby, I'm a bird photographer, and I love doing that. And I joined Instagram to learn my birds, right? And now it's a real community that I've built up doing that, and I love going online and seeing what other people have done, and then I feel like I've got to add to it. But I've sort of I've turned down wedding photography now. I don't really want to do that anymore. That's a young man's game or a woman's game. It's, you know, there's a certain look that I think people are after for that, and I'm not. I'm just more of a pure shooter. Like
100%.
I've never used a filter in my life. I don't know where. I don't even know how to apply them, kind of thing. So, you know, when you see someone's grid on their Instagram page and it's all warm and fuzzy stuff, or, you know, ethereal sort of colors, that I don't, you know, that's not my look. But I can tell scrolling through my thing whose photos which, without even looking at their name. I can tell people's stuff. But if you want to shoot, start shooting.
Right.
You know, some of the gigs you're going to do for free, right? All of a sudden somebody says, hey, we're getting married. Oh, let me do your engagement photos for you. You did a good job. Somebody else is going to call. It takes a long time to sort of build up, you know, as we all know, it takes a long time to build up a clientele where people are going to call you or recommend you, or so it's just, I think if you want to go further with that, you know, that's where school, what you guys are doing, and one day you have your eyes set on working for Disney, you might have to have something to back you up your process. So you might have to take the RTA course at Ryerson, or, you know, broadcasting or something, right? That, you know, gives you that extra, you know, you're still going to shoot your own stuff when you're young, and you're going to, you know, put your reel together. But if you want to take it to the next level, you're probably going to have something backing you up.
100%. I think something to just kind of like stem off of what you said, you know, in terms of just shooting as much as possible, doing things for free, is also in the meantime, like kind of finding out your niche, right? Like you were talking about the first job at in, you were working with, you said it was your brother, or?
It was a cousin
the wheels.
at the studio. Yeah,
yes, the cousin with the studio was like,
cousin of mine,
he built an entire niche around, you know, cars and car parts. And I think a part of the experience of, like, you know, becoming a successful photographer is finding out what you niche in. Like you can totally do what's trendy. Like if you're scrolling online, you want to try something and it's trendy, like do it for fun and then see what kind of comes from that. I think that's kind of how me and Poya actually started too, right? Like we were just shooting for free a lot. So for anyone who's just starting up right now, like, you know, we were in the same position 4 years ago, just shooting whatever, doing commercials, doing like dance studios. And then what really made us big was finding out what we really enjoyed, which was actually teaching other filmmakers and starting photographers, you know, how to get into the craft, a little bit more about their camera gear and stuff. So, you know, just to kind of add on what you said, like trying as much as possible, finding out what really sticks with you, and being a little bit lucky in the process, right?
Right. I 100% agree. Sorry. Yeah, I 100% agree with like Danny's point of finding a niche. I would say we're probably not that niched, to be honest, right now. Like we're in like commercials, weddings, like music videos. Like we're in so many things that, you know, we're hiring on other people. Like this is a more than one man type of team to be able to handle this stuff, and brain power as well. So at the end of the day, you got to decide like how hard do you want to work and how many industries do you want to be in, because every industry you're getting into is something new, right? In that sense. So I would definitely take a thought about that.
And never say no, you know, like that's when we last worked together, right? Was when I got a call to shoot some video, but I'm not that comfortable shooting videos, right? I was close to saying, yeah, sure, I'll do it, and I'll have to figure it all out. And then I thought, what if I land on my face? Like, it doesn't do my
might as well
career
just
any
find a team
good.
instead.
And I'd met you guys a couple of years prior, and I thought those guys seem to know what they're doing. So that's when we got together and worked together last. So it's also knowing, you know, what your limitations are. But as a shooter, I mean, any still project that somebody could send my way, I'd be happy to take on. But I'm still baffled a little bit by audio, and I can't really edit anything together. You know, I can, but
yeah, well, like you said,
that's a real skill, right?
Yeah,
a good editor can save almost anything, right? So
100%.
Right.
Yeah,
and going back to like connections, I think me and John, we met at a wedding,
yeah,
right? And we didn't even know each other at the time. We met at a
Yep.
wedding. You're like, hey, you do video? And I'm like,
Yep.
oh yeah. And then you're like, I'm into photography. And then we exchanged Instagrams. And a year or two later, John
Yep.
ended up, you know, connecting with us and working together. So the possibilities are always endless. You never know what and who you're gonna meet.
Exactly, and that's all it is networking, right? In any business, I mean, if you're in sales, you know who to call, and over time, you know more people that you can call. In my business, I mean, the first show I did, I didn't know any suppliers in town. I'm reading a script and going, where am I going to find that? You start making calls, and you know, one thing leads to another. Over the years now, my phone's full of contacts now that I can say, oh, you need a, you know, whatever. I know who to call, right? That's what helps me succeed. But it's a over time process, right? You can't just sort of jump in and go, you know, you can't jump in and work like at the highest level right at the beginning. But
Yeah, that's for sure.
the same in any business, right? And everything leads to something else. So
Right. I think as a property manager, I feel like it's super important. A lot of people don't know exactly what property managers do. So if you could explain to our audience a little bit, you know, what your day in and day out consists of, I think that'd be super valuable.
Sure. So when I get hired, I'm ahead of I'm pre-production and throughout the shoot. I get the scripts sent to me. Used to be hard copies, now it's all digital, and they're all watermarked so that you don't send them off to you guys, and everybody wants to keep them secret. So you work through those scripts, and over time and experience what your responsibilities are in a script. Scripts are funny because when you read them, the screen direction, there's dialogue and there's screen direction. The screen direction rarely alludes to costumes or set decoration. It doesn't say, Danny and Poyo are sitting on a red couch. It just says scene 3, interior studio, right? And then you guys start speaking. It doesn't really explain the set, but it almost always explains the props. So some props are highlighted for you almost. They're like, wearing a headset and holding a microphone. Now we know you're maybe a sportscaster or something. It breaks them out, and then there could be some clues to what else is required in the scene in dialogue. It'll say that I alluded to holding a football, or let me throw you this ball is my dialogue. Well, you have to sort of assume that, okay, somebody's carrying a ball. That goes on for feature films for 105 or 110 pages or whatever. An hour-long drama is 60 pages, and a half-hour comedy is maybe 30 pages. You work through all those scripts, highlighting everything that you need, even the things that aren't listed, like fishing line, so you can shut the door, so that even though the door doesn't want to shut. These things that you end up with in your kit, but you have to think of all the things that might come up while you're on set, and those come with experience. I'm lucky now because most of the time I'm behind the scenes. I started on set when it was just myself and an assistant, and there was no on-set dresser. So camera shoots this way. Okay, we got that guy's angle. We're going to turn around now, and now the camera has to go here. You guys got to move all that furniture and all that stuff to accommodate lights and camera. So you're moving furniture, and you're setting up the background for the camera, and you're handing off the props just before they roll. Well, over time now they realize, okay, that was maybe too much work for the property master and his assistant, so they made a position called the onset dresser. So now you've got a person that all they take care of is furniture, and they make this shot look nice. and they've got a busy job. Sometimes they might get a break, but most of the time they can always find something to do. They got to hang drapes. They got to, practical lights, all that sort of stuff. So it gets a little easier because now I've typically got a couple of assistants on set and a buyer that helps me purchase or rent all the stuff that I've broken down in the script. And so that working on those scripts, you come up with a breakdown that you can submit to the ADs and say, okay, this is what I think we need for the scene or the show. The producers want to see it. Then you start amassing things and showing things. Is this what you had in mind? No. Oh, I wanted a purple one instead. Okay, fine. They don't exist, but we can paint it, and then it just snowballs and you're busy all day trying to accommodate the show. So it's scripted that the guy comes to the door with 4 pizzas. Okay, fine. We shoot that scene on Monday. On Wednesday, we actually shoot the interior where they're eating those pizzas. Now you got to find pizzas at 7 a.m. Where are you going to do that? Well, you got to order them the night before, keep them in a fridge. Where are you going to keep them in? It's August and you don't have a fridge that's big enough to hold the pizzas. So now it's just, you don't realize it's going down. When you watch a show, if it's done well, it looks seamless, and it looks like the actors just found the stuff on set and they just spoke. But the writers are the first people that deserve a pat on the back, because without them there's nothing. And then the actors just sort of bring it to life. Mm-hmm. And props is it's pretty far down in the thanks for a good job category, right? It's like if props is done well, nobody cares. But if it's done poorly, that's when
everyone cares.
They notice. Like, hey, where's the guy's thing? Or he left the house last month holding an umbrella, and then when we cut to the exterior, where's his umbrella? Oh, we lost it. Or I don't know where it is, or I forgot. They don't want to hear that, right? So
yeah. There's something I was kind of interested in, because I was just kind of scrolling through social media, and there was this video of this prop master, how he explained the different attributes of the props that were necessary to be successful on set. So for example, there was like a grocery bag, like a paper grocery bag, but it was made out of foam because they didn't want it to picked up the sound and like fake ice. Right, it was like Jello or something like that. Can you talk a little bit? Like, are there any other like really interesting props that that you need to know to make it work on set? Like, can you give us some examples?
Those are great examples. The sound guy hates noises, right? All he wants is pure audio of people talking, because there's Foley artists that put it all back in later, right? So if I'm holding a cup and I set it down on a bar, they want you to put foam on the bottom of the cup so when it gets set down, or they say, oh, have you guys got some placemats that we can put that cup on? Later, when the show's all edited, they send it off the finished product to a Foley artist, who I have a buddy who that's what he does. They put those sounds back in. It sounds foolish, but if you set a cup down while you're talking, that screws up your audio, right? So it's not clean audio. And so paper bags are the worst. There's companies that make cloth bags that look like paper bags. I've got a couple in my kit. They're pretty cool. I think they look bad, but there are some sound people that are like, yeah, no, it's fine. That's natural, or actors that are really good at not making a noise while they're talking. So they know to set their cup down when there's a break in their speaking, right? Those are experienced actors that, not that it's on them to do it. It's just some of them really understand their craft, right? What else was I thinking of for sound? There's just some, there's some wacky things that you have to do, like that, that behind the scenes look ridiculous to people that aren't familiar with it, but that's just the way it's set up, right? There's a lot of sound issues. Wardrobe people have to put foam on high heel shoes just before a take, because we're on a wide shot, 2 people walking down a hallway in a lawyer's office. and somebody's high heels are clicking over their dialogue. Well, they can't have that, right? So,
Right.
so
And I'm
they,
sure a lot of the times you're coming up with props like on the spot sometimes, right? Do you have any like past experiences you can remember where, you know,
yeah,
something happened and right on the spot you needed something, and what did you do to, you know, fix that situation?
there's surprise props that come up. You know, somebody they do the blocking and they work out their camera angles, and the actors are feeling comfortable with their dialogue, and then they go away to get fixed up while the camera sets up, the lights come up, and then they decide, oh, you know what would be good in this if I had a dozen helium balloons or something, right? You're like, I don't have any helium balloons. Get in the car, you know, call somebody on a walkie and say, hey, can you get over to the store and buy me balloons? That stuff comes up all the time. But I was on a series years ago, and there was an actor who every morning had sort of let's just say he had slow starts, right? As the day progressed, he was better about remembering his lines, but he used to turn to my assistant just as the clapperboard went in. He'd say, oh, you know what? I should have a takeout coffee in this scene. And he always wanted tea in it, right? They'd be like, oh, okay, just a sec. He'd run, get the hot water going. He'd have to run to the craft truck, let's say, to get tea. And they'd wait for you. So they'd make adjustments on set, and he would start thinking about his lines, right? So this went on most mornings. So I said to my assistant, I said, well, why don't you just make some tea? I think we both devised this. I said, make some tea, have it standing by every day in a thermos. So clapperboard goes in, he goes, oh, props, I'd like a tea for this, or a coffee for this scene, like a takeout coffee. It makes them, because some people aren't comfortable just standing there. They want something to do with their hands. Most people like that. Oh, yeah, no problem. Here's your coffee. Oh, thanks. And now it's like, first take, so right off, because he couldn't remember his lines, right? But
oh my God.
We tried to, anyway.
Not hiring him again.
No, he was the star of the show, but
Right. I see. I see a lot.
Here you come in as a new actor and say, "Oh, just a sec, I want to that's bad form, right? You just don't do that." So,
right. I noticed a lot in shows. Me and my girlfriend, like a lot of the time when they have coffee or any drink, it's always empty.
Empty.
Yeah, and they notice it so bluntly there, right? And I always wonder why don't they fill it?
Well, there's a couple reasons. Wardrobe's paranoid that you're going to spill coffee or tea on a white suit, or because if you dampen that suit they're wearing in take one, and now you're like trying to clean it off for take three or something, right? It's bad. So whenever something comes up in the script and they say, hey, that scene where they're getting a fight and you hit a coffee cup, can that cup be empty? Well, then it just sort of became a thing. TV series like fast-paced TV series, like, have you ever watched Big Bang Theory?
Yeah.
And they always have takeout food, but everybody just sort of plays with it. They're in the cafeteria at the school, at the university, and they just sort of pick, but then they talk. Oh yeah, and then they're just about to eat, and then they just keep talking. Well, they don't really. It probably started innocently enough, they probably wanted to eat, but then if you're an actor and every take you're eating like a bite of a steak or something, you start getting really full, right? Or if you had to drink something you didn't like. So they eventually just stop eating, and they don't have time to reset. So if you ate 4 spoonfuls of salad, and we can see your salad in shot, on the next take, props has to run in and put some more salad down to make it look like there's the same amount of salad off the top of the scene, right? There's a commercial on right now, I think it's for BMO, and the woman walks in to the kitchen to see her husband who's preparing a snack for the kids and or himself, and she says, I got the promotion. And he goes, yeah, you did. And they high five, and he's taking, again, they want to have something to do with their hands. He's taking little slices of peppers out of a Tupperware and putting them on a plate, right? So they shot his angle probably 4 or 5 times. He gets his lines right. Okay, let's move on. They turn around or whatever. But they cut back sometimes into another take as opposed to the first take, right? And the peppers move around on his plate. So if you're watching TV and you see that ad come on, just watch those peppers. That's what I do, because And most people notice stuff that's wrong from a continuity standpoint. But I watch that guy's peppers, and they move around on the plate in between takes. They cut to the guy at a desk, and they cut back to them. There should be continuity between those two shots, but because the editors cut into a better line or a better dialogue bit, his peppers don't match, because every time he did it, he moved the peppers into a different spot on a plate, right? So that happens all the time.
How long did it take for you to notice that? You watched the show once and you're
First
like,
take.
Really?
First time I saw it.
Does it drive you? Like, if you catch it on TV shows or movies, you like turn to your family, like, do you guys see that? Rewind, look at the pepper.
On Schitt's Creek, there was a scene where they had pizza. It was like at 7:30 in the morning. So I ordered all this pizza in the night before from a place that the cast liked in Toronto. And I ordered like 10 pepperoni pizzas because they only needed one, but I had to keep replacing the same slice, right? So they open the box, 2 people come in and grab those slices. Well, you don't know who touched what. So those 2 slices of pizza go in the garbage. 2 more slices come in, right? But they don't quite fit. And then as the scene goes on, 3 hours later, you're still shooting the same scene. The pizza starts looking tired, right? Then the cast starts going, well, the pizza's not really like. What can you do? You schedule 7:30 in the morning to shoot the first scene about the meat and takeout pizza. So, it works for the first hour, and then after a while, it starts getting, But on that show, you worried because they started with a wide shot and then they went in for coverage. But when you watch the show, they could have done without a props department. It seemed to me like it's really about their close-ups, right? It's not, right. Props are secondary, but we had to worry about it. But everything that we fretted over, they just sort of cut out, or they cut around, or not that they cut around it. It's just that wasn't part of their game plan. They get the master to establish people's positions on set, and then when they go in for coverage, all that goes out the window. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the other struggles as a prop master on set? Like, I know, for example, some people might have like some last minute requests, and you have to have the connections and the team to be able to go, solve that problem, whatever it may be. Are there any other problems that you have on set? Like, I couldn't imagine if somebody was like, I need a flying couch. Like, how do you go about, getting a prop like that?
Right. And at the same time with Schitt's Creek, like, you guys were in like a random town, right? You guys were away from Toronto. I'm guessing like there's not much resources you have there where you can be like, hey, let's go grab this, right? Like, yeah.
Well, yeah, Schitt's Creek was a funny thing because it was about a 3-month production, right? So I started maybe a month in advance working on the scripts. And the last few seasons, it was awesome because they would give us all 10 scripts on the first day of my job, right? So you could read them all by the end of the day and be like, wow, I know exactly what I'm looking for. That's pretty rare. So it gave you a lead time to look for strange things that you'd never had to buy or build before. But the first 2 months was all studio. So all 13 episodes, let's say, are all shot in the studio. So any exteriors where they leave the hotel and they walk outside into the parking lot in front of the hotel, that was saved for 6 or 8 weeks down the road, right? So we shot for 2 months, and then we would take 2 weeks off. So they called it a hiatus just to give people a break. And then we'd come back and we'd work for a full month on location. So in the morning, scene 1 of the first day back could have been episode 6, scene 22. And then as soon as we got that scene done, we'd be going to episode 3, scene 3. So wardrobe was all over the map. Props were all over the map. We had to have everything that they had in those scenes that they might have walked out the door with, or the stuff that we didn't need outside, we didn't have to worry about until 8 weeks down the road. So, but whenever we were on location, I sort of had to know, in the back of my mind at least, where the nearest grocery store was. If somebody says, hey, we should have, this, or One night we were shooting late. Eugene Levy and Chris, what's Chris's last name? He's the guy that played Roland. They were at a party in his backyard and they got high, smoking pot. So I was standing rolling joints like with fake pot, like as fast as we could. And we had another guy that I work with. He was rolling them too, and we were just sort of putting them aside because every take they needed a new one. And then the scene progressed to the point where they finished cooking the ribs on the barbecue, and they sat down and they were like, they had the munchies and they just kept eating They kept eating ribs. And I bought, I don't know, like a dozen packs of those pre-done ribs from President's Choice. And I had a little barbecue that I brought in from home that ran on a little propane cylinder that basically trashed the barbecue because I was offset cooking ribs. But Eugene was like, these ribs are great, John. And every time we had a scene with ribs, I'd make sure I got the same flavor. But it was like getting late, and my assistant's like, John, we're going to run out of ribs. If we keep going like this, because every take we needed new ribs and put them new ribs in front of them. So I'm running off the Stouffville to the grocery store to buy more ribs. We went through a lot of ribs that night. Anyway, my barbecue was like toast by the end of the night because there was so much junk on it, like barbecue sauce on it. It was ruined. But yeah, you just have to be ready up. You can't. The idea is to never say no, right? Like the director turns and says, "Hey, John, can you?" We had a scene where Catherine O'Hara wanted to. Well, it was written that she used, the story is that she used to be a famous soap opera actress, but she hadn't worked in years, and so she gets this gig in Schitt's Creek to be the spokesperson for a guy that has a winery, and he makes all his wines from fruit. So it's a fruit winery, like, they make it from apples and pears, and so they do this big fancy shot of her walking along with a glass of wine through the vineyards, and she, it was part of the commercial that they shot for it, and she throws up because she's been drinking all afternoon, but at the production meeting, like, back in April or whatever, they said, no, she's just going to sort of, sort of catch herself. And I said, well, does she have to do a spit take? Like, do we have to give her a mouthful of puke and then she spits it out? No, I don't think it'll be that bad. It'll just be a little thing. So, okay, fine. Because Eugene was sort of making the call on that. And then we get there to shoot the scene, like, in June. And Catherine says, it'd be great if I do like a huge projectile vomit. And if that was the case and decided like 8 weeks ago, then we would have had the special effects company come and they would have probably rigged a pipe with probably some compressed air and stuff right beside her face. And they would have shot it from here and you wouldn't see the stuff coming out of her mouth. And so she turned to me and said, John, do you think you could figure something out? I was sort of mad because I was like, I asked this question back in April, but I said, yeah, okay, we'll see what we can do. So I found this thing in my truck. It was like a plunger, and we hooked a tube to it, and my assistant was holding the pipe like right beside her face, and I was down below frame with this plunger, and when she went to barf, we went, and it went firing out. And I thought, oh, okay, this sort of worked, right? And she was laughing and thanked us for doing it. And then we finished the scene. And next season, I come back, and the first thing she said to me was like, sorry, John, they cut that scene out. I didn't know they were going to. She thought I was mad because they'd cut the scene. I was sort of pissed because I watched the show, and I was like, oh, this is funny. Watch, she's going to throw up. But they cut the scene out. I guess CBC or somebody said, it's too graphic, or, it wasn't funny. It was just it wasn't subtle enough, right? So anyway, that went away, but we tried. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was good fun. Mm-hmm.
I think we've reached about our time here.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions right now, we can answer one or two questions on Instagram. If you guys aren't in Instagram, you can go to the bottom and ask any questions you guys have to John. It can be really about anything you guys want. Just put it down there and we'll answer you guys as much as possible. I really liked, being able to talk to you, John, because I did watch Schitts Creek, and the whole thing was just hilarious. And I love how it's Canadian made as well. There's not many shows that you know, are super successful like that are Canadian. So
yeah, I think that's
it was an honor
to
to
Dan's. Yeah,
like that.
I think that was a testament to Dan's vision, because it was all his. You know, we had to check everything through him, because he was very particular about what things looked like and how things went down and the writing, and so yeah, he's a smart guy. So
Right. Was there a time on a set where you remember where you couldn't fulfill something that was like needed, and how did you guys work around that?
no, I don't think we ever had that. There were a few sort of tense moments where I said, "Hey, is this?" I'd go online and Google search umbrellas or something for Catherine's outfit, and he said, "Yeah, that one looks good." And then when I went back to get it, like to order it online, it was like, "Can't get it for 6 weeks. Uh-oh, what are we gonna do?" Anyway, I ordered it anyway. I thought, okay, I'll take my chances. And then like the next day, they showed up at the office, but I was freaking out because we needed them in a week or something. I thought, oh, they're not going to show up. And I said, yes, we can get these. And, so there's always that sort of panic. It's tricky now because of COVID too, right? You can't just hop in the car and go get something, right? It's all online shopping. It's sort of weird.
Right. It's a lot harder.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Amazing. Okay. I think we're going to end it here. John, thank you for hopping on. We really appreciate your time in coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for hopping on with us.
Much, yeah.
Yeah. No. Everything was good. I think there was a lot of entertainment on there as well, and knowledge at the same time.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks. And yeah, I'm glad we met. So keep all your contacts open.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you. We shall talk to you soon.
Yeah, you bet. Take care, guys.
Later, guys. Amazing. So just as everyone else is on here, we are going to have someone very special on the next episode. So we're going to do a little bit of promotion here. Next week on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, we're having Justin O.D. show on the show. If you guys are into editing and watch YouTube videos, you've definitely seen him. He makes a lot of editing tutorials, so make sure to hop on there and give him a shout. If you guys have any questions pre-hand, about 24 hours before on Instagram, we usually throw up, hey, what do you want to ask this person? So make sure to be on there. You guys can ask any questions you want from Justin as well. So that will be really fun on there. We're excited for that episode. Aside from that, thanks for hopping on. Danny, do you have anything to say?
No, I mean, it's going to be an exciting podcast. You don't want to miss it. So we'll see you guys next week.
Amazing. Awesome. We'll see you guys there. Thank you.